Solve the equation by completing the square. The method of completing the square is used for not just solving equations, it can be used for finding the vertex of a parabola, and then in calculus we use it for something completely different. So it is an important skill. The first thing to do is, the idea is we're going to be factoring this, and it's much easier to factor if it starts off with just x squared instead of 2x squared. So in order to get rid of that 2, divide everything by 2. So we'd have 0 equals x squared plus 4x. And with that negative 5 over 2, that is not going to help us in factoring this thing. So what we do is just leave some space and just put that minus 5 over 2 over to the side a little bit. The next thing to do is you take this number right here, cut it in half, and square it. So the 4, we cut it in half, and then square the result. So that's going to be a 2 squared, or in other words, 4. So what that means is we need the number 4 in here in order for this thing to be factored. But you can't just add a 4 in. So you either have to add 4 to both sides of the equation, then take that 4 and move it to this side, or in other words, you can add the 4 in and then subtract it right back out. So I haven't essentially changed the equation, because at any moment I could just say, okay, those two disappear, and I would get back to the original equation. All right, next what we do is say, gather these first 3 terms together, and that can be factored. And it can be factored into a perfect square. That's why we have this. So x plus 2, if you multiply that out, you will get x squared plus 4x plus 4. The way that I knew that was a 2 in there so fast is because whatever is in the parentheses over here is what goes in the parentheses over here when you're factoring it. So if this, for some reason in the parentheses, would have had a negative 17, this would say x minus 17. Okay, now to finish up over here, we need a common denominator, so this is going to be over 2 and times 2. So that's negative 8 halves, and negative 5 halves makes negative 13 halves. So that is completing the square. And if we were talking about this as a parabola, we would know that the vertex is at negative 2, comma, negative 13 halves. But we're not finding the vertex right now, we're supposed to solve it. In order to solve for x, we could take this 13 halves and move it to the other side, or in other words, add 13 halves to both sides. Just 2 more steps. Next, get rid of this square by taking the square root of both sides. When you do this, you do plus and minus the square root of the number. Then we would have x plus 2 without parentheses, plus and minus the square root of 13 over 2. And then subtract 2 from both sides. So it's going to be negative 2 plus or minus the square root of 13 over 2. And that is the solutions.